was in about 7th grade when this happened. Back then, none of us had phones. We were still kids, and smartphones weren't something kids got. But my dad had 2 phones at the time, a newer iPhone and one of those classic Nokia phones. Nokia had some cool mobile games like Spider-Man and Prince of Persia. My brother and I used to love sneaking one of the phones at night and playing until we got sleepy. It became our little thing, staying up late, passing the phone back and forth, trying to beat levels in total silence while everyone else in the house was knocked out. Now here's the thing. Back then, we all used to sleep in the same room. Me, my siblings, sometimes even my parents, especially on hot nights, so sneaking the phone had to be done super quietly. One night, we stayed up way later than we should have. I remember looking at the clock and realizing it was past midnight, and we had school the next morning. My brother had already dozed off, but I was still playing Spider-Man on the Nokia, completely hooked. Finally, I decided to stop and put the phone back before anyone noticed. I carefully tiptoed over to where my dad kept his stuff and placed the phone exactly where I got it. Then I walked over to the kitchen to grab a glass of water before getting into bed. But when I came back to my mattress, the phone was there, sitting right next to my pillow. At first I stood there, staring at it as if I were seeing things. I reached down, picked it up slowly, and yep, it was the same phone. Same open game screen, same half-finished level I was just playing. I looked over at my brother, thinking maybe he'd gotten up and grabbed it again while I was in the kitchen. But no, he was out cold, breathing deeply and not moving. Everyone else in the room was still asleep. That made my stomach twist a little. I got up again, more careful this time, and placed the phone back with my dad's things. I even double-checked it before walking away. It was there. Then I crawled back into bed, pulled the blanket over my head, and just lay there, wide awake. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but eventually I drifted off, though I kept waking up every hour or so. The next morning, I didn't tell anyone, not my brother, not my dad. I didn't even want to think about it. And after that night, I stopped sneaking the phone. I started focusing more on school, slept earlier, and honestly, for a long time, I just forced myself to forget it ever happened. But now that I'm older, I still don't have a real explanation for that night. All I know is I put the phone back, and somehow it came back to me. I've always believed my childhood home was haunted, not in the movie-style haunted house kind of way, but in that quiet, creeping kind of way. The kind where you can never fully shake the feeling that something is just there, watching. The house was built by my grandfather, a man I never got to meet. He passed away unexpectedly years before I was born, but my mom always said he loved that house more than anything, poured his soul into every nail and board. Sometimes I wondered if that was more literal than metaphorical. We all had strange experiences there. My parents, my sister, even my aunt who lived with us for a while. But the weirdest one happened to me when I was around 13. It started when I was just a toddler, though I don't remember it. My mom told me that once, I pointed to a photo of my grandfather and said, "That's the man I saw sitting on the wooden stereo." Apparently, I'd gone over, patted the air next to him, and said, "It's okay, I see you." They brushed it off as a kid, just being weird. But over the years, things kept happening. Most nights were quiet, but there were some when I'd hear these deliberate sounding creaks and knocks coming from just outside my bedroom door, sometimes from the hallway itself. My room had to stay open at night to help circulate heat since the vent in there worked better than the rest of the house. That unfortunately meant I couldn't shut the door on whatever was making those sounds. It wasn't like the usual settling wood or pipes. It felt intentional, like something was testing to see if I was paying attention. The noises would usually stop the moment I sat up or focused in on them, but if I ignored them long enough, they'd start again, sometimes faint, sometimes loud. I always felt like I was being watched. One night in particular, it must have been around November since it was chilly. The sounds were worse than usual. Instead of subtle knocks or occasional creaks, they were rhythmic, persistent, like footsteps pacing the hallway. I remember staring at the ceiling, willing myself to fall asleep, but every time I got close to drifting off, the sound would get sharper, louder, like it was purposefully trying to keep me awake. Eventually, I sat up and decided to read something just to take my mind off it. Figured if anything could put me to sleep, that would. I lay on my side, head resting in my hand, the overhead light still on. I must have nearly nodded off 2 or 3 times, but the moment my eyes started to close, those sounds came back again, louder, more urgent. By now it was around 1 a.m. I'd had enough. I told myself I was going to my mom's room. If she let me stay there, fine. If not, I'd sleep on the floor. I just needed to be away from my own room. I closed the book, placed it on my nightstand, and started walking toward the door, when I heard it, this crinkling noise behind me. Now here's the thing, our mattresses still had the plastic covers on them because my siblings and I had a history of spilling drinks, and replacing beds was expensive. So yeah, sometimes you'd hear a little rustle when getting off the bed. But this wasn't normal. It was loud and long. I was already at the door when I realized it hadn't stopped. I turned around slowly and saw it. The side of the mattress was shifting, wrinkling, as if someone had brushed past it, and I swear, I saw a slight impression, like something had just walked across the bed and slipped off the side. I froze, just for a second. Then I walked, fast, no running. I didn't want to wake anyone up, but halfway down the hallway, I could have sworn I heard another set of footsteps behind me. I didn't dare turn around. Mom's room at the end of the hall, and gently nudged her awake. "Can I sleep in here tonight?" She squinted. "Why? What's wrong?" I don't know. I just feel weird," I said. She yawned. "You didn't bring your pillow, did you?" I hadn't. And as much as I didn't want to go back out there, I needed one. I turned and walked back toward my room, slowly. This time, I was hyper-aware of every sound, and as soon as I stepped into the hallway again, I heard it. Footsteps behind me. I stopped, and the sound didn't stop with me. It kept going. 2 more deliberate steps. One of them sounded like it landed a foot behind me. My skin went cold. This time, I didn't care how loud I was. I ran, bolted into my room, grabbed the nearest pillow, and ran back down the hall without looking back. I swear I could hear the footsteps continuing, not chasing me, just pacing behind me until I was out of reach. I crashed into my mom's room and shut the door behind me. I didn't fall asleep for another 30 minutes, heart still racing. The next day, I didn't mention it, just kept it to myself, like I usually did. But later that afternoon, I overheard my mom talking on the phone. It was my grandma's birthday, and suddenly, it clicked. I learned years later that my grandfather used to go all out on her birthday. Decorations, dinners, cards, everything. It was his favorite day of the year to celebrate. I don't know what I experienced that night, whether it was him or something else entirely. But I do know this. Every time November rolled around, I started to sleep a little less easily, and I never left my door open again. When I was 10, everything I thought I understood about life changed forever. My dad inherited an old country house in rural Victoria, Australia, from an estranged uncle none of us really knew. He thought it would be the perfect place to raise a family, away from the city and all its distractions, quiet, peaceful, ideal. But he had no idea what kind of nightmare we were stepping into. The house sat in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by thick forest, far from any neighbors or towns. In the daylight, it looked kind of cozy, but by night, it turned into something else entirely. It had that unsettling charm that only old places do. Wooden floors that creaked under every step, narrow hallways that always felt too dark, and that constant scent of old wood and dust lingering in the air. There were 4 of us: my dad, mom, my older brother Theo, and me. We moved in full of curiosity and hope, completely unaware of the nightmare we'd slowly be dragged into. The first few nights were quiet. My dad spent his days fixing the place up. Mom unpacked boxes, and Theo and I roamed the backyard, playing explorers. But by the 4th night, something happened that I've never forgotten. I was in my room reading when I noticed a sudden coldness in the air. It felt like the shadows in the room had deepened, swallowing more than just light. Then I had this horrible sensation, like I wasn't alone, like something was watching me. I looked toward the hallway, and there it was. Peeking around the doorframe was a shadowy figure. It didn't move, didn't speak. It just stared. I couldn't make out details, just a vague outline of a head and shoulders. My body froze. I couldn't even scream. After what felt like a full minute, it slowly slipped back into the shadows. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the light. But that wasn't the last time I saw it. In the following weeks, more strange things started to happen, always to me, it seemed. Toys would move positions overnight. My bed would sometimes tremble as if someone was pushing it. I'd wake up with the sense that someone had been standing right beside me, staring. One night, I woke up to a whisper, a voice softly hissing my name. I sat up, sweating, and saw that same shadowy shape, this time at the foot of my bed. It was darker than the darkness around it, like it didn't belong. I screamed, and my mom came rushing in, flipping on the light. The figure vanished the instant the door opened. She held me and told me it was just a bad dream, but it wasn't. Everything changed when Theo had his own encounter. One morning, he came into my room, pale and visibly shaken. He told me he'd woken up during the night and saw a woman standing at the end of his bed, wearing a long, old-fashioned nightgown, her face pale and her eyes hollow. She didn't speak, just stood there. That was when my parents finally started to believe us. From then on, things escalated quickly. Lights flickered on and off, strange tapping noises echoed through the walls, and we all felt cold drafts, even with the windows sealed. But things didn't stay subtle for long. There are 2 moments burned into my memory forever. The first happened during our 2nd year in that house. Dad was gone, picking up supplies from town. A thunderstorm rolled in, and the air felt wrong. Theo and I were trying to watch TV, but the power kept flickering. Eventually, everything shut off completely. Then came the cold, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones. Theo and I sat frozen on the couch as the corner of the room grew darker than the rest, unnaturally so. Out of that darkness, a figure stepped forward. Its eyes glinted with a dim light, and it wore what looked like a permanent, sinister grin. We both ran, upstairs to our parents' room, slamming and locking the door. Even Mom felt the chill and dread in the air that night. The second moment I'll never forget was about 2 years later. By then, my dad had accepted something was very wrong and agreed to have the house blessed. A local priest from a nearby town came out one afternoon and walked through the house with a crucifix and incense, reading scripture aloud. That night, after the blessing, I went downstairs to get a glass of water, and I wasn't alone. I felt it behind me, like a wall of cold air pressing in. I turned slowly and saw him, the man, the figure that had haunted me for years. He was clearer now, his skin pale, one side of his face horribly scarred and sagging, his eyes hollow. He stood in the doorway, unmoving. I was frozen. My legs gave out, and I dropped to the floor. I couldn't even scream. He took one step, then another. Each movement sucked the warmth out of the room. When he was only a foot away from me, my dad ran in, yelling, and just like that, the figure vanished. It was like the blessing had only made it angrier. Our 5th and final year was hell. The activity became constant. None of us slept well. We heard whispering through the vents, loud footsteps overhead when no one was upstairs, doors opening and slamming violently. Shadows moved on their own. Objects flew off shelves. It felt like the entire house had turned against us. Eventually, we decided we couldn't take it anymore. One evening, while packing to leave, the house lashed out in what I can only describe as a tantrum. The walls shook, lights burst, the air was freezing, and we could hear voices, dozens of them, all whispering, screaming, crying. Shadows raced down hallways. It didn't want us to leave, but we did. The very next morning, we drove away without looking back. None of us ever went near that house again. Later, we found out that the property had a dark past. The original owner, some man named Horace Fielding, had supposedly lost his mind in the late 1800s and murdered his family before vanishing into the woods. Locals believed his spirit and those of his victims still haunted the house, reliving their suffering in an endless loop. Living there changed us. It's something we rarely talk about anymore, but the memories, they never leave. And sometimes, even now, I'll wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, almost sure I saw something watching me from the hallway and waiting.